Good morning and welcome to Newsline, live from the Newsfirst studios here in downtown Colombo. Joining me this morning is Bandula Jayasekara, senior journalist and former diplomat. Good morning.
Morning, Faraz.
And how are you today, Bandula?
Good, Faraz.
And our guest this morning is Mr. Vijay Dasa Rajapaksa, the Minister of Justice. Good morning and thank you for joining us.
Good morning.
I was going to quickly say to you that on this day that the body of Wasim Tajuddin is being exhumed, just to bear in mind what so much of grief is being caused to this family to get on with their life now that they've lost their son 3 years ago. Dreadful bit of police work, do you think?
Yeah, and then like we have discussed for us, I mean, he should rest in peace, but then, it's being, turned around. So finally, I think in a way, if this is done, this should, there'll be a closure for the family, for everybody. I'm sure it's in the best interest.
Perhaps the Minister of Justice wants to say something. I don't know if you can, but...
No, certainly that there has to be justice.
Yeah.
There are enough materials, I think, for them to go for an investigation on criminal charges.
Yeah.
But since a matter is sub judice, we need not talk too much about the details.
Indeed, yes. But it seems to me, as a member of the public, that senior police officers are getting away because they are being influenced by supposedly people higher up. What can be done to address this sort of malaise that's going on?
Now, of course, that the police has got the independence that they can go ahead with this their inquiry without any interference, and it will be impartial one.
Right.
If they reveal that's however much that they they were in high power, law will be enforced.
Minister, the courts in Sri Lanka appear to be fully overburdened. We did a quick calculation that if the courts worked for just 2 hours more every day, so instead of finishing at 3, if they could, at the moment they're working about 5 hours, if they worked for 7 hours, this would be an increase in terms of productivity by 40%. Now, last year we had, at the end of 2013 actually, we had a total of outstanding cases at the end of the year of around 713,000. Now, 40% of that is 280,000 cases.
Yes.
Could be, there'd be additional 280,000 cases, 280,000 less cases in the court system, giving you more time to hear the cases, the rest of them.
In fact, that this is an issue that had been taken into consideration from time to time.
Yeah.
There were certain periods where the JC had introduced, because the court system is controlled by the Judicial Service Commission.
Yeah.
They had introduced that 2 sessions, in the morning session and in the afternoon session at least till 4 o'clock.
Yeah.
But in certain courts, of course, that there is no difficulty that they can do it.
Yeah.
But in some courts, the judges are not involved, not only hearing the cases.
Yeah.
Even the court administration, then so many judgments that they will have to write. In fact, it's a 24 hours job. But with all that, as you suggest, that if we can increase the number of hours, working hours, certainly that it will help to decrease the number of pending cases. And in addition to that, I think even in the civil cases, they take a lot of...
Yes, it takes up to 10 years on
sometimes
some
10 years.
partition matters.
And also poor people suffer, especially in the villages and all, they suffer because they sell their property and then they go to court, pay the lawyers.
In fact, the main reason behind this is the 2 main procedural laws, Civil Procedure Code and the Criminal Procedure Code.
Right.
These have been drafted in the last century, more than 100 years, during the colonial period.
Yeah.
And when they drafted the law, there have been only very few cases, and they have introduced a very lengthy procedure.
Yeah.
Now, even after 100 years that we have not thought of changing the law.
Yeah.
There was an attempt during the period of then Minister of Justice Felix Das Bandaranayake, who introduced the administrative justice law in 1973. But after that, again, with the introduction of the 1978 constitution, that we have been reverted to the old procedure. I think that this is a high time for us to get out from it and to have a procedure convenient for both lawyers, judges, as well as to the litigants. And also we must try to have to dispose all the cases within a shortest possible time period. For that one, we have already drafted for civil cases judicial mediation. Once a case is filed, before you follow all these procedural laws until the trial stage, that there will be an attempt with the assistance of the lawyers of both parties. The judge will sit as a mediator and to amicably settle. I think that will work. Now it is already drafted. We will bring that to the cabinet very soon.
Minister, I have a different type of question. Now, how come the bigwigs, the politicians, when they are the corrupt people who are involved in murder and other things, they end up in the prison hospital, whilst the ordinary, they are sent to jail? Why is this?
Now, this is a real, allegation against us also during the recent past. But the problem is that according to the existing law, there are only two ways for any suspect to go to the suspect or convicted person to go to the prison hospital. One thing, that's the aggrieved party can make an application to the magistrate. The magistrate can take into consideration the medical reports, and then he can form an opinion that he is a person who should not be in an ordinary cell, that he needed some medical attention. The other way is that there is a chief medical officer in the prison. Then if the prison chief medical officer recommends that he should be taken into the hospital, then nobody can oppose it, because our opinion cannot be.
Just help me with your question here. There are 17,000 people in the prison system.
Yes.
Right? About 5 of them or 6 of them have ended up in the prison hospital. The rest of them, are we to presume that they are not ill enough to go to the prison hospital?
Not really 5, 6.
5 or 6 politicians.
Politicians, that is true, but normally that's over 100 people are there.
Right.
Of course, that we have seriously considered this implication during the recent past, that there are some proposals that we must amend the law just to have some kind of monitoring system as to whether these medical officers, because all these recommendations come from the doctors.
But Mr. Rajapaksa, now see, this is what the masses, you have to decide, because the poor don't fall ill, they don't get sick. It's for years the politicians, the rich, they end up in prison hospital. It's time we change this, because the people want real justice.
Indeed they do.
That is true. That is why we are thinking of having a monitoring system, just to have somebody above this prison doctor, and maybe from the general hospital or some other expert, because the problem is that when an expert, the medical expert, gives his opinion, but nobody can challenge it.
But I think all this is brought about because of the simply awful conditions inside the prison. It is overcrowded. And there are people sleeping along the floors, and the board outside the prison reminds us that prisoners are humane too, or they also have human rights.
Just the board only?
Just the board. There's a board there, and it always makes me smile, but smile with sadness, because inside there is a totally different ball game. There are people who are on remand, and yet, they have to sleep on the floors because there's no other place.
That is true, that the prisons are overcrowded, but recently that we have found some alternatives. We have started a rehabilitation camp, especially those who are addicts to drugs. So about close upon 2,000 persons are in Kandakadu, Polonnaru.
Oh, that's encouraging.
And also we started another rehabilitation camp in Mahara prison.
Right.
And we started another new one in the last month.
Right.
In Amripur. In addition to that, the Boosa camp, which was under the police during the period of that terrorism.
Yeah.
Now we have taken back, and we have sent some of the prisoners there.
I see.
In addition to that, we are building a spacious place in Agunukala Palace. I think once that Agunukala Palace is completed, there won't be a big issue.
What about the open prison camp in Pallekal, which was very, once upon a time, it was taken as a model open prison camp?
In fact, that is an exemplary thing. It's working very well.
I want to ask you, this network is very much in the forefront of having a drug-free society, drug-free parliament and so on. People start off with tobacco, and then they move on to alcohol, and then they then sort of progress onto harder drugs.
Yeah.
But the law for within these drugs, you have soft drugs and hard drugs. The hard drugs are far more addictive and therefore cause many more social problems, medical problems, the burglaries and theft and crime rate goes up with people associated with hard drugs like, say, heroin, cocaine and so on. Is there any plans that you may have to sort of split the offences into a two-tier for soft drugs and hard drugs?
In fact, that we are working on it. We have established a special presidential task force headed by the president.
Right.
And every month we are meeting with all those responsible officials, with the police officers and the others who are involved in the narcotic control, as well as other experts. And we are going ahead with this identification of all these issues and having a simple law, because that as it is, there are too many laws. There are a lot of implications, but much beyond that there is a bigger issue. Now there is an allegation by the international, that's the other countries, the Sri Lankan land as well as the sea around Sri Lanka have been used for the drug trafficking. And that is the biggest issue. They say that most of the drugs comes from Afghanistan, and that is the country where that's the largest amount of drugs being manufactured. Then they go across the Sri Lankan sea area to Middle East, then to Europe. And recently when we had the international conference, every 5 years they are having an international conference. We had it in Qatar in April, and there is a different agency for the controlling of drugs and crimes of UN agency.
I see.
And I invited, after taking into consideration all these materials and allegations, I invited them to have their office in Colombo, UN Drug and Crime Controlling Office. In principle that they agreed.
I see.
Now we are going ahead with that one. In fact, if not for this election, the Director General of that agency was to visit Sri Lanka in last July.
Wow. But not a victim of the elections.
Yes, it can be. But it could be so.
But why can't you bring the death penalty? Why is it? Because, I think, my point is, Mr. Rajapaksa is, I think generally Sri Lankans are cowards. Because if you hang one or two, this will end. This is what the masses feel. Why don't you do that?
That's 10 years ago when Justice Ambedkar was killed. I suggested that it should be implemented. In fact, that there is nothing for us to do. The law is intact. It is there. Then that is only for the signature of the president is needed for the execution. When Justice Ambedkar was killed, I suggested to the former president, and there was a press release. I was told that 50% of the people in the prisons, they have fallen sick. But they are so scared. But when we were talking during that period, that there were a lot of opposition. The people were telling that it's not a solution for this one, that international standard is this, that you cannot,
It happens all the time in the US.
That's right. But as you suggested that during the recent past, that I also said, even the president said that if we cannot control this crime rate, that we have an option, we will reconsider as to whether we should implement the law.
But you have to balance it with this Sri Lankan preoccupation with religion and achieving the middle path. We've on many times I've mentioned that Sri Lankans are on the whole rather ecclesiastically leaning. So we have to balance the two.
But as the crime rates increases, so we cannot have only sympathy for criminals. I mean, there are lots of other people who are in need of sympathy than these criminals.
No, I concede that these laws, the punishments have been introduced not to take revenge from the offenders. That is for the safety of the rest of the people living in the country.
Also, Minister, can I suggest this, that there is in this 700 odd thousand cases pending at the end of the 2013, 140,000 was to do with motor traffic offences. Now, can't much of these be converted into fixed penalty notices? We all know that if we're caught using the phone while driving and we go to court, we're going to have to pay the fine. I think it's 3,500 or 5,000. Now we know that. So I got caught and I had to go to court. I pleaded guilty and I couldn't pay the fine, not because I didn't have the money, but the money was with me and I had to then rely on a friend who had to come along with me to pay the fine. Now that's 140,000 cases, and if each of them ended up with the same experience as me, that's 280,000 people whose one day is out of the working economy. Because we can't go, we both didn't go to work that day. I'm fine because I was the accused, but what about the friend? So the two of us, he had an imposed day off. Isn't there somewhere where these little things can, if you took 140,000 out of the system and gave them fixed penalty notices,
spot fines.
You go for spot fines.
Not the entire 140,000.
Yeah, well, not entirely, but let's say 100,000.
Yeah. In fact, that is one of the areas that we have identified that law has to be amended.
Yeah.
And in addition to that, we were discussing to bring a law, to amend the law, to compel, to have a compulsory law for all these passengers in the vehicles on the expressways, highways. That we were working on it. Working on it means that we have already started some discussions.
Sorry, I didn't understand a bit about the passengers on the highway.
Just to have the seat belt, sorry.
I see, okay.
Well, compulsory.
With these fixed penalty notices, things like this, these telephones, you can do wonders with it. You can pay your fixed penalty with your credit card, and the debit cards is something that is growing in this country. Everybody has a debit card, almost, right? So you have a fixed penalty, you register online, you've paid, and you're done. I'm sure that the ministry receives the money quicker as well.
That is an excellent idea. Only thing is that still our government sector, but they are not used to this high-tech.
That's all because there's
Minister, what happens is we have the rules, we have the laws. These are not implemented.
That's it.
That's what we have to do. To me, that is good governance, not changing the constitution. Because if we have the rule of law, not only one for politicians, one for ordinary people, follow it. Traffic, follow it and find them. Not follow them. That's what we should do.
They just use their phone and pay.
Certainly that, but with this procedure, just to start this kind of procedure, that we'll have to amend the law. That is what we are considering, but as until that you told that we have not taken into consideration whether we must introduce a procedure just to pay through the phone.
When we go to the doctor, we can now channel people and do pay out of this.
That is in the private sector.
Strict enforcement of law would help.
It would.
For anything. I'm not even talking of this fine, but anything. Then that will bring peace.
200 years ago, that's Thomas Jefferson, the third president of the US, said, the implementation of law is more important than making of them. We can see that's all our problems during the recent past was not that we didn't have enough laws.
Right.
That's the question of implementation.
Yes.
Unless that there is a political will,
right,
then it's very difficult to work this government machinery, law enforcement machinery. That is the biggest issue. Now, of course, I think that we have improved the system.
Right.
Now, irrespective of the height and might of the people, that the police are taking actions.
Right.
You have to give them the freedom.
Well, they seem to have the freedom, but now they're saying that until after the elections. Everything is after the elections.
No,
I went to the laundry. The man said to me, I'll give you your shirts after the elections. I said, really?
So that is so busy. You cleaning the clothes.
Everything is after the elections. So can we have your assurance, Minister, that after the elections, and on the premise that hopefully you'll hold on to your job, because continuity is another thing that we need, that you look into all these matters. What about the remand? There were so many people.
Right. I can give you that assurance. Then I can substantiate my position. You may recall when the 17th Amendment was enacted, there was a police commission. All these people were talking that the police was so independent. They were impartial and they were doing a very good job during the period of Mr. Ranjit Tabesurya.
Right.
But after that 17th Amendment, of course, with the 18th Amendment, it was abolished. Now we have laid the foundation.
Right.
19th Amendment was passed. Then there will be Constitutional Council, which will take the burden of appointing independent commissions. Once the independent commissions are appointed, of course, there will be a better improvement than in the 17th Amendment one, because we had identified certain lacunas in the laws and we rectified in the 19th Amendment. Once the police commission is empowered, the control of the police, then no politicians will be able to influence or interfere with the function of the police officers.
Right. And very quickly, just to ask you a little bit more about these, the prison system. What about these children who are unfortunately also in prison because their mothers and fathers are also in prison? I've been there. There was one lady who was trying to feed her toddler, not even a toddler, an infant, with a teaspoon. It's incredibly difficult to try and feed a child, a baby, with milk with a teaspoon, because they didn't have the bottles or anything like that.
There are separate provisions for that, but I agree, it's not sufficient. That is why we recently presented a bill to the cabinet. It was passed. That is a the Children's Judicial Protection Bill. We hope to get it passed in the next Parliament. And now it is with the legal draftman. With that one, there will be a lot of protections for women and children, judicial protection. So we have identified those things.
Okay. I need to ask you this question. People associate the UNP as the big party when it comes to law and so on. What has the UNP done for our justice system?
You are referring to the past?
Yes, of course, in the past. What have they added? What in the present context? What do you say is the main thrust? Have they made? Can you say one thing that is the major thing that they've done?
Now, one of the major things, for an example, we have drafted Victims and Witnesses Protection Bill.
Right.
That is one of the areas where that's the international community, international agencies who are making a lot of allegations against our country. They say that they cannot expect any justice in any kind of litigation because you have not introduced this Witnesses and Victims Protection law.
Right.
In fact, during last 150 years that we have made law, there was no single law.
Right.
Just to protect the witnesses and victims.
Right.
Unless that there is protection, there is a guarantee that witness won't be harmed by coming out with the truth. That's nobody will be elucidate the truth and come to a correct conclusion in a litigation.
Okay, thank you. I need to ask you another one. We had a prison riot. There were various claims made that people were shot to order. Is the truth in the matter?
Yeah, just give me few seconds.
Yeah.
Just to say that Victims and Witnesses Protection Bill was drafted 13 years ago.
Okay.
But the government didn't have the will to do it.
Okay.
When Geneva also, that we had some problem, one of the questions they had posed is, why don't you bring this law? Because that is how all the culprits, that's go away, scot-free.
So
we passed that.
UNP government.
No, during the 13 years period, none of the government couldn't do it.
Oh, I see. Okay.
But during the 100 days period, we passed that law.
Okay.
And with regard to the prison incident you asked,
yes.
In fact, that there was a 3-member committee appointed by the last regime.
Not 3 UNP lawyers now. That's a bond issue.
That's a bond issue.
Okay, go on then. Carry on.
This is another one of the headed by High Court judges, retired judge.
Okay.
And there was a report, but we couldn't accept that recommendations and contents of the report, because we felt that it was just to whitewash the crime that they have manufactured a report.
So you've done another one?
I appointed another committee headed by another retired High Court judge, that they have come out with various recommendations, and now we have handed over that to the Inspector General of Police. We entrusted to him that he's going ahead with the inquiry. There have been 27 people killed.
That's right. Do you think there's a possibility, if not compensation, at least an acknowledgement that something happened, and perhaps an apology to the families of those people who were killed to order?
Certainly, that it has to happen after the police investigation. In addition to that, this report itself make recommendations with regard to the compensation also.
Right. And what of the election now? Election violence. Have we ever had a prosecution for election violence?
During the previous elections, very, very rare, unless there was a major incident like that's the killing of that Bharat election Premchand or something.
Yeah.
But now over 500 cases have been filed.
Right.
By the police for the violation, especially, but there are no major incidents. 99% cases where some people have pasting posters and various things.
Fixed penalties. You can give them spot fines.
I think that will be a good idea. But so we have to reconsider all these things. In the next parliament, we hope to have a new constitution.
I must ask this question, otherwise the public will hang me. Why haven't the government caught any of the rogues that they spoke of in the pre-presidential election?
There's no, I don't think that you are correct in that one. Nobody, because we have already filed over 30-odd
there's a in remand for very small matters, nothing to do with the billions that they say.
Of course, that you will take some time to trace all this money that they have robbed during their government, and they are doing it in such a way, in a decided manner, that it will be difficult for anybody to trace it within a couple of days. And you know that even this Hosni Mubarak funds, they took 3 years to find it, that his family is having about $8 to $9 billion in various countries. And after that we are getting some assistance of experts.
We are not too far. The foreign minister says that the former government spirited away $18 billion.
Yes, that's what he says. That is true. We have some information, but when you will have to take into the courts or to the law, we will have to substantiate, and we will have to get the old materials before we start any kind of litigation.
All right. Mr. Vijay Rajapaksa, Minister of Justice, thank you very much for being on our network, and it was a pleasure having you.
Welcome.
Thank you, Bandula, for joining me this morning. And talking about justice, the time is always right to do what is right. On that note, I wish you a very good morning and God bless you.